Inflation is at its highest level in 4 decades. That means prices are sky high for everything from groceries to gas to rent.
According to the Department of Statistics Malaysia, Malaysia's inflation rate continued to increase at a slower rate, falling to 1.5% in November 2023, with the index point record at 130.9 against 129.0 in the same month of the previous year.
This is the definition of inflation and consumer price index. Inflation is the rate of increase in price over a given period of time. However, consumer price index is a measure of how price change over a period of time, or in other words, it is a way to measure inflation. Consumer price index or CPI is used to measure cost of living. It has positive relationship with inflation. Next is how the consumer price index is calculated. First, choose a base year. Designate 1 year as the base year, making it as a benchmark against which other year are compared. Value given is 100. Second is selection of consumer goods. Goods used by most consumers based on taste, custom, and average spending pattern on the local community. Third is the weight of selection items. Great weight is given to the most important item. Next is how to measuring inflation. Consumer cost of living depends on the price of many goods and services and the share of each the household budget. Formula inflation rate is current price index minus recent price index over recent price index multiplied with 100. This is the example of how to calculate inflation rate. For 2011, consumer price index given 101.4. So 101.4 minus 100 over 100 multiplied with 100, so we got inflation rate is 1.4%. For 2012, consumer price index given 103.1. So 103.1 minus 101.4 over 101.4 multiplied with 100, so we got 8.7% for inflation rate. Is use of inflation. First, we can measure the value of real money. 2. Determine the cost of living. 3. Determine the purchasing power. 4. Determine the value of real gross domestic product. 5. Measure the standard of living. 6. Determine the government to make relevant policies. This is type of inflation. We have 3 types. For 1, demand pull inflation. 2nd, cost push inflation. 3rd, put-in inflation.
There are several factors that cause inflation. One of them is demand pull inflation. This inflation occurs due to the demand exceeding the supply of goods or services in a short period of time. It also stems from an imbalance between the amount of demand and the amount of supplies of goods and services in a country at a certain time. As evidence, inflation of food and non-alcoholic beverage will increase due to the uncertain weather and lack of supply following the increase in demand for food items ahead of the fasting month and Eid celebrations. Besides demand pull inflation, there is also cost push inflation. Cost push inflation is caused by high production costs. This increase in production cost is caused by the increase in prices for production factors such as wages. Usually, manufacturers increase production costs due to high worker wages. When production costs increase, producers will still be able to maximize profits. For evidence, the country's dependence on food sources from abroad shows that society will always be exposed to an increase in the price of goods if the value of the ringgit Malaysia is low compared to the United States dollar.
There are also some negative effects of inflation on economy. The first effect is higher price for basic goods. It costs more to keep the standard of living during inflation. When the value of a currency drops and wage increases don't keep up with rising prices, consumers will lose their purchasing power. Secondly, savings depreciate. Those who live on a fixed income, such as retirees, see the value of their savings depreciate when there is high inflation. We consider retirees who receive an annual pension increase of 5%. If inflation is higher than 5%, then a retiree's purchasing will fall. Thirdly, lower global demand. A higher inflation rate makes a country's exports will be more expensive. As a result, their trade partners may seek other sources for their goods. Fourth, uncertainty in economics. High inflation could lead to people cutting back on spending and investing, which has the opposite effect of mild inflation on economic expansion. This can result in deflation and a potential to contraction of an economy. There are also effects of inflation on investors. When inflation starts to rise, the Federal often increases interest rates to make it more expensive to borrow more in an attempt to take some money out of the circulation. In other words, inflation is usually followed by rising rates. There are some effects on investors. The first effect is declining the value of savings. Saving accounts can lose value if rate of inflation outpaces the interest rate on the account. Secondly, benefits real estate owners. Homeowners and property owners with fixed mortgage can benefit from inflation because they are paying their mortgage payments with ringgit Malaysia that are worth less than those they borrowed. Homeowners who rent out their properties can also increase rents during the inflation, thereby profiting from it. There are some positive effects of inflation on the economy. The first effect is economic growth. When more money in the economy, it will increase the overall demands on goods and services, and it will lead to an increase in production and economic growth. Secondly, more consumer spending. Consumers often spend more in times of inflation. They are expecting high prices in future. When people expect rises, they will buy more today, which one of the reasons the Federal Reserve sets a target of 2% of inflation. When prices fall during deflation, people may cut off their spending in the hopes that prices will drop further. This will lead to contraction in the economy. The third effect is the value of assets increase. During inflation, price of home construction rises and home prices generally will increase. When this happens, homeowners benefit from the increased value. Fourth, easier loan repayment. In an inflationary environment, those who owe debts can pay down loans with money that is worth less than the money that they borrowed. This is because real interest rate will be zero, and this will suffer the lender's real income.
Therefore, various actions need to be taken to overcome this problem. The first suggestion to overcome this problem is that the government can reduce tariff on imported goods and services, especially on goods that people need in their daily life, such as chicken, meat, rice, and fish. It is common knowledge that such goods require high shipping costs to be brought into rural areas. The reduction of the tariff on the goods to some extent can reduce the cost of expenses for producers in rural areas. This action has been done by many countries that face the same problem as Malaysia. For example, Korea has eliminated tariff on some imported foods and increased welfare support for low-income earners. The Ministry of Finance, Korea, said tariff would be removed on beef and chicken imports. The move is expected to cost 330 billion won. When tariffs are reduced, the price of imported goods will be cheaper. This will increase the purchasing power of consumers and will further reduce the cost of living in rural areas. In addition, the country's central bank can raise the policy rate overnight to overcome the problem of inflation. This action has been done by many countries that suffer from the same problem of inflation. For example, the Central Bank of Thailand has raised its main policy rate from 0.75% to 1%, which is an increase of 0.25%. The Malaysian government has also taken the same action by increasing 35 basis points to 2.2% compared to the previous record low of 1.7% to deal with the problem of inflation and the rising cost of living. An increase in the OPR will make the ringgit more expensive. This is said to be so because when the OPR rate increases, the flow of cash in the country slows down and it can continuously increase the national saving. The Malaysian ringgit is becoming more valuable due to existence of a low ringgit in cash flow. This action is a step to fight against the cheap ringgit due to inflation. Money is getting less and less valuable because there is a lot of cash in market but goods are limited. OPR will cost money in the form of cash to become less in the market, which is one of the indicators of low inflation.
In conclusion, as we can learn that increasing the inflation rate is a measure that is not good to the household, especially the people who have fixed income, low income, and retirement income. Price increase for non-alcoholic food and beverage group, housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels as well as transportation are the main contributor to the increased inflation. The increase in the inflation rate will automatically be led to the cost of living, so that when the inflation is higher, the cost of living is also higher. This may lead the people to have less purchasing power to afford their living costs. A reduction in consumer demand for goods and services will cause excess supply to develop at the initial price. Therefore, the government must act to reduce the rate of inflation in all areas as well as close the income gap between the poor and the rich.